daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.
Hello everybody and welcome back to the Daily Newcastle podcast after Newcastle United have lost on the road once again in the Premier League. This time it was at the Gtech Stadium in Brentford, which was a 3-1 defeat to the Bees. My name is Michael Grahamslaw. Let's dive into the game. So, the only change from Newcastle was the injured Anthony Gordon being replaced by Harvey Barnes. Gordon missing out through injury, and it was Barnes that got the only goal for Newcastle, so a change that was maybe coming. But Newcastle were incredibly one-dimensional today, and maybe Anthony Gordon's being out one of the reasons for that. But we'll get straight into it. Brentford are the better team early on. They don't really create anything. Their best chance came from a free kick on the left-hand side, whipped in quite low. Nick Pope makes a great save down to his right. Then from the follow-up, Aaron Hickey, low drive through the legs of Sven Botman at quite a weird angle, very tight angle, and Nick Pope makes a save with his feet. It's a good save. Pope made a few of them during the game. See what his strengths and his weaknesses are just by showing this 90 minutes, if I'm honest. But you're wondering at this point, this is about 20 minutes in, you're wondering when Newcastle United are going to wake up, because for 20 minutes we simply couldn't beat the Brentford press, which was absolutely relentless, by the way. Credit to Keith Andrews and Brentford, because press was fantastic in the first half. But in my opinion, the press was actually the reason why they were losing the game in the first half, despite it being so good. And I'll get to that in a moment. But first, Newcastle United take the lead. The only attack where they managed to break down the press, as soon as they managed to get beyond the midfield, Brentford looked a little bit nervy. It only happened once or twice in the game, but the first one leads to Newcastle scoring. A ball was played into Harvey Barnes. His first touch pass in midfield goes through the defender's legs. It ends up on the right-hand side with Jacob Murphy. His cross is a little bit behind Nick Voltemada, but who does brilliantly well to lay it off to Barnes. Barnes dummies the defender, ends up with two Brentford players doubling up on him. Does a little fake shot, cuts inside, and drills it below Kelleher to give Newcastle a lead. Absolutely brilliant from Harvey Barnes. Put two defenders on their backsides and gave Newcastle an undeserved lead. And then it was the second half, but I will say it's half-time that changes the entire game. Joelinton comes off in the first half for Jacob Ramsey, who I thought was actually okay, relatively tidy, nothing remarkable. Want to see a bit more creativity from him. But in the second half, Brentford came out a completely different way. And you notice that almost immediately, the first thing that happens is Sandro Tonali kicking the ball out for a Brentford goal kick. And then Newcastle give the ball away on the edge of their own box and Brentford nearly convert from it. But what you saw was the Brentford press wasn't really there. They allowed Newcastle a bit more of the ball. And he told Brentford, instead of pressing the likes of Bruno Guimaraes, etc., just cut off the passing lanes. Make it so they have to do a really good pass to actually get through. And we just didn't have the quality to do that. And it meant that we were applying more pressure to ourselves than Brentford actually were. Brentford sat a little bit deeper, not necessarily into a low block, more of a middle block, I guess. But Newcastle couldn't create anything. And Brentford's best chances ended up coming from Newcastle just passing the ball straight to them or just walking into danger. The equaliser comes from a long throw, which comes in. I'm expecting Nick Pope to just punch it. However, there's been two long throws to this point where the first one, Nick Pope has missed it. The ball has hit the top of his knuckles and flew over his head. And then the second time, he just missed it entirely. Third time, it actually looks like he judges it correctly. But instead, Sven Botman jumps in front of him. And it looks like Botman must misjudge his header because he jumps. He heads it straight into danger, straight into the 6-yard box, and Kevin Schade has arguably the easiest finish of his career to just head home and put Brentford on level terms before the 60th minute. So a terrible start to the second half for Newcastle. And then comes the controversy, really, because ultimately it hasn't impacted the game. But there's two big penalty decisions, and the referee gets both of them wrong. And VAR doesn't correct him because it says there's not enough contact one way or the other to justify that change, which, to be honest, for me is completely wrong. Both times it's Dango Otara versus Dan Burn. The first time, Otara uses his pace to get in behind Burn. Burn leaves a leg out. He catches Otara. The Brentford player is done for simulation, which is, I'm not going to swear, but effing mental, really. It gets shown by VAR. You see it in slow motion. Burns' foot goes down on Otara, and you're sitting there going, this is getting overturned. 100%. And probably rightfully so, because Otara didn't deserve to be booked for simulation at all. So if it got overturned, the yellow card's gone, and it's 50-50 for me, a penalty. Actually, 50-50s with me Newcastle tinted goggles on. It's probably 60-40 penalty in favour of Brentford there, in my opinion. But referee and VAR doesn't even send the referee to the screen to say, look at it again, which, to be honest, if the referee had gone back to look and then said, I'm sticking with my decision, no penalty, you can sit there and go, okay, fair enough. Referees had the chance to decide, but VAR makes the decision for him. And then the exact same scenario happens again. Brentford are breaking on their left-hand side. The ball goes in behind Dan Burn. It's a bit of a cross-diagonal, not as long as a diagonal, really. But it gets in behind Burn, and you're thinking Burn's got all the time in the world. Otara gets there first. Dan Burn, he's left the leg out a bit high. There's really minimal contact. Otara goes down, and the referee gives a penalty this time, and you're thinking, yeah, he's in trouble. Dan Burn gets sent off, second yellow card, and you're thinking, okay, we're in trouble. Then the replay happens. You see the replay, and you're thinking, hang on, we're getting away with this. There's very little contact whatsoever there, and there's definitely less contact than the first penalty. So if that's overturned for minimal contact, this one's got to be not overturned for minimal contact, should I say. This one has to be overturned for that reason. Nope, Dan Burn sent off. The referee sticks with his decisions. The VAR confirms it, and then Newcastle make 4 changes to try and accommodate for it. The injured Nick Pope. Ball goes in. Kevin Schade does what Harry Kane did for years. Just get yourself underneath the player, make it awkward so he lands awkwardly. Pope pretty much lands in a tombstone pile driver kind of position, half on his head, half on his shoulder, and you're thinking, yep, he's gone. There's no way he's continuing then. To be fair, it doesn't look like a dislocated shoulder, so that's okay. But Pope did end up coming off for Ramsdale, who couldn't save the penalty. The one thing you looked at from the penalty map was they're all quite central, so don't go early. Ramsdale goes early, and Thiago just puts it literally within touching distance of the keeper if he just stood still, which is slightly annoying, but it's one of those. They'll have done the training, they'll have assumed that Thiago was going to put it in the corner, and it hasn't happened. So yeah, Brentford then lead the game 2-1. Newcastle trying to get forward. Hall puts in a brilliant cross. Rico Henry does brilliantly well to stop it going in. Hall from the left, early cross, in behind the defence. All there is Henry coming back, and he stops Alanga getting on the other side. Alanga would have very likely put it in the back of the net, although who knows with the start of the season he's had. But not for Rico Henry. Brilliant clearance, and Brentford kept the lead. Then it was a pretty even game. We seemed to be a lot more attacking with 10 men. Probably because we were a goal behind at that point, obviously. But same as against Liverpool, really. We're trying to press. Lewis Hall, maybe naively, but I liked to see it personally. Pressing from the left-back position all the way up to the striker position. But then, unfortunately, we're left with 2 really at the back. Malik Chow and Sven Botman. Ball goes in behind Malik Chow. Malik Chow does brilliantly to get a slide tackle in. It's going past Sven Botman, who thinks Nick Pope is coming out like he normally does. It's not Nick Pope. It's Aaron Ramsdale. Ramsdale hasn't come out. lacking communication there. Ego Thiago comes in, slides it beyond Ramsdale, and it's 3-1 to Brentford. Thiago gets his second of the game and seals it, and it summed up a pretty dreadful performance by Newcastle. Energy levels are atrocious. We're being out-battled by pretty much every Premier League side right now, and it isn't good enough, really. 2 more injuries for Newcastle takes our total up to 7, which means 8 players missing for Man City. By the looks of things, hopefully some come back from the international break. But while the last international break came at the wrong time, this has arguably come at the best possible time. Newcastle need Johan Wissa back desperately because our wingers, they play so deep. And on the right side, we're playing so wide that we're nowhere near with Nick Voltemade, who's flicking the ball to nobody at the moment because no one's getting around him. And because Nick Voltemade is coming 20 yards deep to flick the ball, there isn't a single person in the box when we get that crossing. So it looks quite clear that either we need to play narrower. Harvey Barnes was really narrow in the game, next near Nick Voltemade, and to be honest, a couple of times it worked. Barnes being a little bit narrower actually led to us getting the goal, really. But Murphy on the right hand side, he was hugging the touchline as much as what he could, and it didn't work at all today. We need to play Nick Voltemade deeper, when then have the number 9 up front, which obviously Osula was injured today, so he couldn't do. But if Johan Wissa's in there, I would be so tempted to start him and Nick Voltemade together, just so you've got a 9 and a 10 there, really, because he isn't a striker, Big Nick. It's weird saying that someone that's 6'6" or 6'7", whichever he is more fitted for a midfield role than a striker role. But the game's changing, and that seems to be something that suits us. But Voltemade, as much as he is a good player, he doesn't seem to be the player that Newcastle have needed to sign. That is Johan Wissa, because we never get the ball in behind anymore. You look at when we had Alexander Isak, every time we got the ball, it was how can we get Isak on the shoulder, in behind, and it gave our wingers and our midfielders so much more time on the ball. And it even meant when we played a low block at times, as soon as they got forward, they had to get back so quickly, otherwise we were getting in behind. Now, unfortunately, Voltemade isn't that kind of player, and you wingers aren't getting in behind either. So Brentford today knew they could just sit with their back 4. Coyote and Hickey could get forward. The 2 centre-backs are there, and all they have to worry about is whether 2 wingers or Joelinton, who did it a fair bit against Athletic Club and has done it a bit this season, makes the run from midfield to get in behind. But you need 5 or 6 passes to go brilliantly to even make that happen. While in previous seasons, we've just needed 1 ball in behind and we score. Now we're needing 4 or 5 decent passes, perfect passes to actually score a goal. And unfortunately, we don't really have that quality. And if players like Bruno and Tonali have poor games, which I think they both did today, it's a real struggle. But something I'm going to get into through the week. We had planned doing a Premier League pod for Tuesday, just what we'd learned. I think we're going to go with a sort of a bit more on the tactical side. Bring back Tactics Tuesday for that, so look out for that. But something does have to change for Newcastle, and the pretty damning thing is that after the next game week, our local rivals could be in the top 4, and we could be in the relegation zone if we lose to Manchester City next time out. I'm going to finish off with a man of the match for Newcastle. Really only one candidate, in my opinion, and that was Malik Chow. I thought he was excellent again today. I thought Ramsey was tidy. Barnes at times was good. I thought Tonali and Bruno were really quite poor. They both look either ill or just knackered, really. It's really is. I don't want to say they're not good footballers, because they're brilliant footballers, but the energy levels just isn't there. Yeah, and I thought Trippier, Murphy were 2 of the worst on the pitch. I've singled out Tonali and Bruno, but they were. If it was Longstaff and Miley in there, you're saying it's an average performance. Because it's Tonali and Bruno, you're a little bit more disappointed. But Trippier and Murphy were the two probably worst players on the pitch today. They just, whatever they tried didn't work. Trippier was fantastic in midweek. Murphy's been arguably our best winger throughout the season so far, so they will bounce back. Although it's not really hard to say you've been my best winger so far this season. They should bounce back. I'm confident that they will do so. But back-to-back away defeats to bottom half Premier League sides, both 3-1, two abysmal performances, really isn't good enough. And if Eddie Howe was under pressure before the Nottingham Forest game last season, he's definitely going to be if we fall into the relegation zone. But it's all from the Daily Newcastle podcast. I'm not going to go over the top and say all this about Howe out and stuff like that. I think he's done enough to get time, but something needs to change. I'm confident that he'll do so, but I've never been happier for an international break, I can't lie. But for now, I'll see you next time, and hopefully, just hopefully, we'll be talking about 3 points, at least at some point in November. See you later.
Your daily soccer podcast with the Global Sports Podcast Network.